Hey, good morning again, Horizon Church. And once again, I am sorry I can't be with you live, but I'm not able to do that today. So I want to follow up with something that we were actually talking about. Well, for me, it's just a couple hours ago, but for you, it was last week, last Thursday, I believe. We were talking a little bit about I had been talking about legalism, and then on Thursday we talked about how to get things right. And as part of that conversation, we talked a little bit about like the transformation that God does with us. And I want to follow up and talk a little bit more about that. And I really want to talk about thinking, but to get to thinking and how significant our thinking is, you need to understand something about the Bible and Hebrew thought and a way of talking that is very common to us, partly because of the biblical influence. But I need to, I did, if you looked at the thumbnail, I have a picture of our 2012 September trip to Wyoming, my first ever trip to Wyoming in 2012. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit, which is why I use the thumbnail. But first I need to talk about a little bit about what the Bible talks about. So biblically that we often talk about the heart. We talk about the heart a lot in life in general. And the difficulty that we have is, although the way you and I talk about the heart for the most part we think of as the source of our feelings, our emotional life. That's the way we think about it. Biblically, that is slightly off track. That is not the Hebrew mindset about the heart. And this is really significant because of the way we think about the heart, when we apply our thinking to the Bible, we slightly get a little bit misled, and it can cause some issues. There's a great verse in Proverbs. This is a Hebrew part of the Hebrew Bible. Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23. And as soon as I say this, I know that some of you have been around church, or this will be familiar with you. Proverbs, the wisdom of Proverbs talks about guard your hearts, for everything flows from the heart. Guard your hearts, for everything flows from the heart. That idea of flowing is very much a water image. Makes sense because it's water that flows. And that's going to be important because really very, very often in the Bible, the heart is connected to water, to life. And that's why in the Hebrew thought, your heart is really the source of your life in many ways. It is not just the source of feelings, it's the source of life, in that the way you live your life flows from your heart. And for us, that is slightly off track a little bit because we primarily think about it in terms of our feelings. Even the way we talk about it, even in church, the heart is where we feel things. And of course, then that influences how we think when we talk about loving God, and what that means to love God and love other people, etc. We get slightly off track. And this is why it's important when the writer of Proverbs, that's not the only place by any means that the Bible talks about the heart being the source of life or everything flowing from your heart. But Jesus, who obviously was Hebrew, he was a Jewish rabbi, the Jewish Messiah, although God intended for him, of course, to be the Messiah of the world, he is first and foremost Jewish. So Jesus thinks in Hebrew terms. So there's a verse in Hebrews, there's a sentence in John chapter 17. Jesus is having a discussion. It says, John chapter 7, sorry. Jesus is having a discussion. It's an important discussion that he's having. And he says this in response. There's some dialogue going on. In John 7, verse 38, he says, out of the heart flow rivers of life-giving water. Out of the heart flow rivers of life-giving water. And you see the connection there. Jesus actually is more specific. Proverbs talks about the fact that life flows from the heart. Jesus uses the image of water, of a river flowing. Out of the heart flow rivers of life-giving water. And that is a relatively common Old Testament theme, Hebrew theme. Isaiah 12, I think, I don't remember the verse, Isaiah 12, Zechariah chapter 14, Isaiah 58, and other places, Proverbs. They talk about like rivers of life, and sometimes they connect it to the heart. And this is just a common image. Jesus, when he is at she's speaking to the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman at the well. What does he say to her when he says, "Can I have a drink?" And she responds by saying, "You, a Jewish man, asking me, a Samaritan woman, for a drink?" Remember how Jesus responds to her. He says, "If you knew who was asking you, you would ask him, and he would give you water, living water that always satisfies, and you would never need to thirst again." And again, there is that image of flowing water, life-giving water. That's technically what it means when he said, "I'll give you life-giving water." It's the idea of flowing water that flows endlessly, never runs out. And that's what he's saying to her. And this is an image. And this is why I need to get at this for really what I want to talk about, because I want to talk to you about thinking, which is what we'll get to Thursday, but I need to set it up today. And to help you understand that when the Bible talks about the heart, it is not primarily talking about the place where we feel. It's really talking about the place where our lives are directed. And when we let our heart direct our lives, we're in trouble. I'll talk about that in a minute. But first of all, the water image. This is why this is so important to understand this. You and I, rarely are we in situations in which we have to give thought to where we get our water. It is just so easy for us to access life-giving water. We get it from our spigots, get it from our hose. Rarely do we have situations where, maybe there's a flood and, the city sends out a notice, don't drink the water, boil it, whatever. And then water becomes an issue. But 99.9% of the time, water is not an issue for us. It's easily accessible. The reason I wanted to show you the picture of the Wyoming trip, because I never thought about this. I have done hikes, 2-3 day hikes, occasionally a longer hike, not often. And when I've hiked, I give some thought to water, where we're going to get it. But for the most part, I'm not driven by, you just carry it. You carry a couple bottles. If it's an overnight, that's easy. Or I go to a place where I know there's an easily accessible spring. But in that hike in 2012, we were planning to go for 2 weeks, and we were going to be, backpacking. I know I've talked about this before. We backpacked for 2 weeks, and I never thought about the fact that concern number one, before you think about anything else, is water. I had never really thought about that much before. If you're going to be hiking for 2 weeks and you're going to be going to the wilderness, a place where you do not have access to tap water, and there's no way you can carry enough water for 2 weeks, your number one concern is we need to camp by water. We need to be near water. We have to be. It's the only way we're going to survive. And once you make that decision, once you figure out, and Dan was leading us, Dan knew right where there was a spring, and that's where we camped. Actually, we camped really two places. One was, I know there's a lake in that picture, but that is not a source of drinking water, that lake. That was a high mountain lake, and I suppose we could drink it because we filtered all their water, but that was a couple miles from where we camped, where I was successfully harvested my elk. But Dan knew two places. One where was a spring, and one we camped by a river. And once you solve that problem, everything else is secondary. You can carry hydrated food enough for 2 weeks. Your clothing, we went with minimal clothing. Everything else is secondary to the need for water. And in the Hebrew world, the ancient world, that's the way those people lived all the time. If you lived in a world where every single day you are going to have to get water from a well, this is one reason why wells play such prominent places. Sometimes wells are kind of characters in biblical stories. This is why. because your number one concern, where you're going to live, your number one concern has to be, is there a source of water here? Without water, you don't live. So when the Hebrews use water, flowing water, as an image of life, they connect it to the heart. And they say, Proverbs, guard your heart, for everything flows from the heart. Your life flows from the heart. Jesus talked about out of the heart flow rivers of life-giving water. He talked to the woman at the well. I could give you water, never-ending supply of water of life. Do you see the connection between the heart and water, which means life? So the Hebrews, in the Hebrew thought, what Jesus is talking about when he talks about the heart, when the whole Bible talks about the heart, what they are talking about is all of my life flows from here, not just my feelings. Because here's the problem with feelings. When we think about the heart this way, when we think that the heart, out of my heart flow feelings, if that's what directs our lives, you know as well as I do that our feelings are not dependable. They are not reliable. There's a famous expression. I'm old enough to remember Woody Allen's expression when Woody Allen left his wife, Mia Farrow. He left his wife for Mia's 18-year-old adopted daughter. I forget her name. But it was a scandal. It was horrendous that you are leaving your wife for her daughter. I'm pretty sure they eventually got married. It was just a really ugly episode. And Woody Allen is famous for trying to explain that decision by saying the heart wants what it wants. The heart wants what it wants. And Woody Allen was confessing to, I know it's not logical. I know that it's probably not even moral. But he's saying, can't help it. The heart wants what it wants. Now, you may not know this, but that's actually Woody. I don't know if he was quoting Emily Dickinson, but that phrase comes from Emily Dickinson, from a letter that she wrote to a friend when she was trying to console a friend who I think was grieving. Can't remember exactly. But she wrote that expression, the heart wants what it wants. I don't know if Woody knew that, or if he was just expressing himself. For those of you who are younger, you maybe know Selena Gomez wrote a song, The Heart Wants What It Wants. But it was Woody Allen who made that famous, made it infamous in some ways when he said it. So when we think about the heart our way, when we think that the heart is really the place from which feelings flow, it's not really the way the Bible is thinking about the heart. The Bible is talking about the heart as the place from which our lives flow. So to be more accurate, we really should think about, in some ways, we should really think about our minds. Because when your heart directs you, you know as well as I that that's probably going to ding. I see who it is, and I should just shut it off because it's going to start a process of dinging. Sorry about that. When we're heart directed, if we function like Woody Allen, if we met every inclination of our heart, you and I know that we'd be in trouble. I wouldn't be here if I decided to just go with my feelings all the time. You and I know that feelings are a gift to us. It's wonderful to feel, even when we feel badly sometimes. It's appropriate feelings. But the heart is not a reliable director of our lives. It's actually more reliable for us, the way we think about life, to think about our thinking. It is our thinking that really is the more reliable director. So when Jesus is talking about the fact that he can give us never-ending water, that image, when he's talking about from the heart, and Proverbs, when we're talking about from the heart, life flows. Jesus is first of all talking about what he can give us, the hope, the eternal transformative hope that he gives that you're not going to get anywhere else. Nowhere else are you going to get that. It comes from Jesus alone. But what Jesus is giving us is not just a way to feel, he is giving us a way to think. And it is thinking. This does not mean, that we are logical, that we're unfeeling logical creatures. What he means is that the way we think is what directs our lives. This is why thinking is so important. This is why when I was, wanting to talk to you about thinking, I recognized that unless you understand that this is what the Bible's talking about, we tend to go into thinking about this subject as if it's logical. And that's not entirely true. This is not logic alone. This is all of life, that our lives are often really directed by what we're thinking about. Even if Woody Allen was honest when he said the heart wants what it wants, if we could be honest with ourselves, even in that, what he's confessing to in many ways is, I decided this is what I wanted, and I wasn't going to be talked out of it. And really, in many, many ways, even what we feel is the result of what we choose to think about. That's just the way it is. So you need to understand that biblically speaking, when we quote things like Proverbs, guard your heart for everything flows from it, the writer of Proverbs is not talking about guard your feelings. And when Jesus said, out of the heart flow rivers of life-giving water, he is not saying out of your feelings come the gift of life. He's really talking about what it is that directs our lives. And of course, in some ways, he wants to be that. Jesus intends to be the director of our lives. But for our purposes, really, biblically, that idea is what we think about. So I want to pray for us, and then on Thursday, when you guys plug in, I'll probably look exactly the same shirts, etc. Same bags under my eyes, because I want to talk to you a little bit about thinking and how important it is, and we'll focus on that. Let me pray for you, and then we'll get on with our days. God, thank you that you're our creator and you know us so well. God, I thank you for ancient men and women of wisdom who knew and understood human beings in ways sometimes that we don't anymore. God, I thank you too supremely for your son, Jesus, and for what you did. Thank you for how you have given us the offer of transformed lives, transformed living because of Jesus Christ. God, thank you for our feelings. Thank you for our minds. Thank you for our emotions, and for the gift that they bring to us. This gift of being able to experience life not just through thought but through emotions. But God, help us to also understand that it is our minds that are key to how we live life, how we think, how we process life. So God, I pray that you'd be at work in us. That you be helping us to think about how we think. And I pray that you'll be able to do this. God, I want to pray your blessing on everybody who's connecting and listening today. God, I pray for them, as all of us have anxious thoughts and good thoughts, and all of us have joy-filled thoughts, and all of us have sad thoughts. All of us have thoughts about what we're going to do tomorrow. All of us have thoughts about family, friends. We have thoughts about what we eat, thoughts about how we drive, thoughts about where we work. God, I pray that you be helping us with those thoughts, directing them to be the thoughts that you want us to have. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, everybody. So thanks for tuning in, and love you all. And I will see you, I'll be talking to you Thursday. Anyway, see you. Love you. Bye.